Okay, I got it. I got it.
Hey,
Hey, mate.
how are you?
Sorry about the delay.
That's okay.
Crazy. I was watching you, but I do these things all the time, but I couldn't work out how to join anyway. I got my cycling top on for you.
Oh, amazing.
All right.
I was just literally going through, like, obviously we've been mates for such a long time, and like probably like 20 odd years plus, and I was actually I never really sort of read all the history and stuff about you, and it's just gone on and on and on and on. Some of the amazing things, and I was just like, wow, because I remember the conversation we had in Mexico City after the social. We caught up in the hotel after, and it was just me chewing your ear off for hours, asking you about, how you
I remember
started.
that.
Yeah, starting in the industry. We were with Chris Hodgson,
That's
um,
right.
and
Old mate of yours.
yeah. So I kind of want to start at the beginning. Really, I want to kind of figure out like how you managed to get down this route, to where you are into radio presenting. How you started, your background of sort of music.
Um, at school, just always loved music. Always wanted to fiddle around with music, banging drums when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I kind of obsessed over my dad's record collection. It seemed quite glamorous, he did buy like Beatles and Stones, but he also bought like exotic kind of Brazilian drumming records and Santana and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So just got attracted to the whole, double gatefold sleeves and vinyl. And then he got me a drum kit, started drumming in a band at school, kind of doing heavy metal covers. And then saw a DJ one day at a school disco, thought that would be a much better thing to do. And then me and my mates started doing literally school discos, weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever, whoever would have us. And then realized pretty quickly that people danced to kind of funk and soul better than they did to Deep Purple. So I just always had an affinity with soul music. And then growing up in kind of, well, I was actually living in Hartley and Longfield at the time, just which is pretty close to Gravesend. So started to kind of socialize a bit in Gravesend, and then I got a gig in a pub, like an infamous pub called the Nelson, and I was resident in there probably when I was too young to be in there to drink. I was probably 16 or 17 years old, setting up a kind of mobile disco in a pub, and all the crowd that used to come in there were into soul and jazz funk and reggae, and they were older than me, and they were going up to London, and they were bringing me back records and stories of like clubs like Crackers, and then in Essex the Lacey Lady and the Gold Mine. So I kind of got drawn into it that way,
Yeah.
and kind of really, I mean, ended up on the radio because it was just the only way of getting noticed back then, and the only way I could be connected to the scene of the
Yeah.
day was listening to these DJs, Robbie Vincent and Greg Edwards. And just, I mean, before that, I was also obsessed with radio, just the notion of playing records you liked to loads
Yeah.
of other people. So I used to sit at home listening to radio shows, copying down the names of all the records and stuff like that. I was just a kind of obsessive fanboy.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And then, I was reading you obviously worked for Soul and Blues magazine as well, and then left to go to work at London Records quite young, didn't you? You were quite early on working.
Yeah, I was actually in I mean, Blues and Soul magazine was the mix mag of the day.
Yeah.
And it was the first place where, instead of just interviewing like famous musicians from America, like Marvin Gaye or Frankie Beverly and Mays, they wanted a kind of a column, someone to write about the actual club scene of the day. So I got the gig doing that, and they found me at a DJ competition actually in London,
Yeah.
and they said, and they liked what I didn't win the competition, but they offered me a job. And that was a great initiation. First job in London, first company car. I had to go around selling advertising as well to kind of record shops and reggae stores. And then that was my kind of entry, I guess, into the music business, albeit not, you know, just through a magazine. And then
yeah,
a few years later, I ended up getting the opportunity to go and work at London Records.
Yeah, when it's
and a great time. It was 1983, and it was pre-house music, you know, just as electro and rap was kind of hitting hard. And I got into that situation, and pretty quickly they started sending me to New York, and end up bumping into Run DMC and then Salt and Pepper. So I got off to a good start.
I know, I was reading, yeah, that was one of the stories that you told me about, and it was something that I didn't know. Obviously, I've known you such a long time, I didn't know that in your background. And then obviously FFRR, which came just after, just became one of the most iconic sort of labels in electronic music, you know, especially for me. Every time I saw that logo, it was like, I want to buy that record, you know. It was such a good time.
It was interesting time, because when I joined London, it was just as London was relaunched, and it was an old label from like the 40s and 50s that got relaunched by these two guys that were successful for other labels, called Tracy Bennett and Roger Ames. Yeah. And when we relaunched London, it was the dream was to be like Island Records. It was like we could do, you know, black music, we could do dance music, we could do, you know, we could sign Roxy music. And that's the way we started, and it was all pretty cool. Like Run DMC, I signed, actually came out on London, and even the first house album, the House Sound of Chicago Volume 1, you know, Steve Silk Hurley's Jack Your Body, Farley Jackmaster Funk, Love Can't Turn Around, they all came out on London.
Right.
And it was really the competition from other labels. It was just when Cool Tempo started, which was a label, a dedicated dance label at Chrysalis. Fourth and Broadway obviously was a dedicated dance label at Long Island. And then you had labels like Rhythm King start, which were independents that were killing it.
Yeah.
So we were kind of dragged into it, almost reluctantly, like with the decision of starting a dedicated dance label. And I was looking at, we're thinking what to call it. And if you look at the old London Records label close enough, you'll see that there's a stamp of quality on the middle of the logo, and it actually says in small print, Full Frequency Range Recordings, and that's where we got the name from. It was actually part of the old fashioned London Records label.
Oh, okay.
But we started it. First record I released was Baby Wants to Ride by Jamie Principle, yeah. And the second record was Push It by Salt and Pepper. So we're off to a flying start.
Yeah, straight away. Was there one record that you really wanted at that period, but you just couldn't get? Was there one record that you can think of that you were at that time? Because I remember back then there was even the modulators you were trying to get from us at the time. Do you remember that? But was there one act that you always wanted that you never quite got over the line?
Millions.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
I mean, right from when I very first started, it was like Soul to Soul.
Yeah.
In the FFR era, Massive Attack for sure, and I ended up signing Smith and Mighty, which was the other band from Bristol, that not quite as successful.
Yeah.
But I love them dearly, Rob and Ray. Loads.
Looking at the list, you Armand Van Helden, Goldie, Salt and Pepper, Orbital, Little Louie, Jamie Principle, Frankie Knuckles. You pretty much covered everything, every style of, because obviously it wasn't a genre based then as it is now. Like you look at Beatport and you see there's like, I even looked today, I didn't realize there's two sections of techno now. Like it was very much all under in the same.
Yeah, at the beginning it was like I always wanted it to have a kind of urbanness, like soulfulness. You know, it was always about, my roots were always black music, as we called it back in the day.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Jamie Principle was a soul singer, really, you know, over a Frankie Knuckles house beat. You know, Salt and Pepper obviously were a rap group. So we did start, you know, FFR was always had that kind of soul feeling to it. Later on, when the records became, you know, the kind of rave era particular styles, we did start a label called Freedom for a while, and we had Systematic. We had some other kind of spin-off labels under FFRR that were more genre specific, so techno specific even. So mad.
It was like you say, it's still obviously still going today, isn't it? So it's
yeah. I mean, I parted company with it. I mean, I left it a long time ago. I mean, the label was eventually sold in as part of London in the early 2000s, and then I left the label, and then I came back into it as an advisor in the Warner's era about I don't know, probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, and that's when I signed. That's when Hot Natured was signed to FFRR.
yeah.
So I did that deal with Jamie and the band, and then continued to advise them over the last kind of 5 years, and then recently left and started a very exciting new venture with Sony, with Mark Gillespie, with 360.
Yeah.
So still
Over on our side now, on our side.
exactly your side of the fence.
Like me, you have broken like so many careers. You know, I obviously owe you a massive thanks to what you did for me in the early part of my career. And obviously that was down to you having a platform and something you kind of created at Radio 1, wasn't it? You kind of were there since 91 and kind of set the direction of the Essential Mix, which was the holy grail for DJs trying to break through onto the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw it quite. I don't run around, to be honest, thinking like I broke this, I broke that. I mean, I do think, yeah. I mean,
it's kind of what we say behind your back. So we talk
right.
about it behind your back. We never
I like
tell
to
you to
think
your face.
I helped. You were making good music, and I just like shared it with a few of my friends. So I think it's, yeah. I never claimed to turn water into wine, but yeah.
No,
I mean, the platform.
you were very, very proactive with trying to find new music, and that's the one thing I've like really. You love finding new music. You love finding new artists. You love finding new tracks, and that still shows now. And like for me, you know, even when I'm having conversations with people like Mark Knight, you know, it could be anyone in our scene that's come through my genre. You've always kind of given them the platform with the Essential Mix and your show to let them voice their sound.
Yeah, I mean, it was always about. I mean, the core thing I've always done is never really changed, which is like, as you say, like find a record you like and then tell you about it or tell someone else about it.
Yeah.
And obviously, having a radio show gives you a bigger voice, especially back in the day. So I was, you know, I had a passion for radio, I had a passion for music, I had a passion for the scene, and you know, I was lucky that opportunity came along at the time it did. I mean, Jeff Young had that slot. It was, you know, it was a kind of mentor of mine back in the day who kind of brought me more into the soul and jazz funk scene, and he had a record company career as well, and decided after a few years on Radio 1 that he wanted to concentrate on that, and then that slot became available, and I was like the #1 draft pick because I was already on Capital Radio.
Yeah.
So and then to arrive like after 3 or 4 years of the rave scene, just as the UK was cleaning up its act and all these like legendary clubs were opening, like Ministry of Sound, Cream, Gatecrasher, God's Kitchen, you know, Progress in Derby, Venus in Nottingham. I mean, every town and city in England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland had a club within the first few years of the 90s, and we had this incredible network, this community across the UK, and nobody was talking to them. So I come on the air in 1991. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and the take up on the show was huge in terms of the impact on the listening figures and stuff like that. And that's where I got the leverage to then kind of push open the door and get a mix show on the air. Also would like to think I was instrumental in helping, you know, Jules and Danny Rampling back in the day, Seb Fontaine, all these people that then came on board, and kind of suddenly there was a huge commitment to dance music and the scene on the British National Public Service youth radio station. So, and it's pretty much remained ever since. And that's really why it has so much impact, because bless the BBC, they've been so consistent. You know, consistency is everything. I mean, you can go on the radio one week and play a great record and people talk about it, but when you do it week after week, year after year, you know, and that builds decades, then obviously it really starts to move the needle. And that's the legacy of you know, I've obviously been a central part of it, but now that, you know, with Annie being there for so long already, and Danny, that's why people still care about what we do.
You don't really see one person being at one radio station for 30 years. You don't, because, and still as relevant as the day that it started, because, you know, the Essential Mix now, I even go listen to the Essential Mixes still now, people send in, because, and even on your show, it's such a wide variety of music, and it's so important, I think, that platform for people breaking music. And it's good that Radio 1 actually have got the balls to kind of stick with something and not try and chop and change so quickly. You know, it's for me, if I want to put a comparison, John Peel and you, that's for me, that's how I think. You know, I used to listen to John Peel and you, and now it's still the go-to show to listen to nowadays. And it's
no, thanks for that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I still love doing it. I was doing it all day yesterday, recording it last night, and then because obviously I'm in LA now, so I finished it off this morning actually and did the mix. I mean, and it's been even more fun, funnily enough, in lockdown, because in a funny sort of way, I mean, I've always been very hands-on with the show, but I mean, I'm even more hands-on now. So you know, so it's all good.
I remember I was actually
the problem is always I don't have enough time. You know, 2 hours is not long enough to play everyone's amazing music. You know, so that's why I've been doing streaming sets, just to get more out there.
It's been great, and it kind of makes you kind of like this whole process that we're going through. You know, the traveling gets to us, the things get to us, but then you kind of, when you take the ball away from us, we miss it so much that I kind of, when I'm doing my recordings and the streaming sessions as well, I'm really missing it at the moment. I'm missing that part of it so much.
I mean, I've sometimes done. I mean, obviously, I've been doing, as you pointed out, this a long time, and I've built radio shows in all different sorts of ways, and obviously, with all the technology available to us, you know, the norm of doing the mixes on the mixed sections of the show is I've been using Ableton, you know, and we you know, there's a lot of tricks you can do in Ableton, but funny enough, since lockdown, I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to be DJing in the club anymore. I'm really going to miss that. So we've been back to analog, old school. Nice. So every mix since lockdown has actually been live off the turntables. You know, not a kind of tiny bit of editing if I've run too long, but not editing anything. Like the mix transitions, everything is as you hear them. So it's been a lot of fun, and I think after lockdown I'm going to keep doing it. It's good.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I've even gone back to, you know, I even got the decks out the other day. You know, started playing vinyl again. It's just the things that you took for granted have been taken away. Now you want to go back and try and remember everything and use everything again.
Well, vinyl's been fascinating. I've started playing vinyl out over the last couple of years, and I got some of my vinyl got damaged horribly in a flood in a storage unit in Twickenham, and it made me get them out and move them and like catalog them all again. So they're now sitting in a shipping container in East London in a beautiful library. So I started using them again, and we started. You know, I did that thing in Miami last year with Daly. We were due to do it again this year, and I've been doing some vinyl sets from home. But it's also, you just play completely differently on vinyl. Yeah,
you're right.
It's just you just play different style.
Don't you think as well? I remember, because obviously the amount of records that you had on a certain night was way less than what we have now. On our laptops, what have we got? 5,000 to 10,000 records on a laptop.
Yeah, at least.
I don't think that I've DJed as well since I left vinyl, because I used to be able to see the color of it, flick through it, pull it out, put it down, and just go for it. Now it's like I'm searching for it. I'm trying to remember the name of it. There's no, you know, unless you put it into a playlist and you're really on top of everything. But
yeah, I used to have a photographic memory for sleeves and like labels. And when I got in an awful mess when we went from vinyl to CD, that was like a nightmare because obviously on a CD you could have 20 tracks. You remember the days we used to have to write all the names, you know, burn them and write all the names down. And in the dark, it was a complete nightmare. And then often like I'd be doing a gig with you or something, and you'd be like, "Oh, I love that track," and like, I'd give you the CD, and then when I go to play the next gig, I've forgotten to reburn it. So it wasn't really the whole CD era. It was just a mess. And so I was quite happy when we finally jumped then to Tractor and stuff like that, or Serato. But
Yeah,
Because at least I could read the screen, as nerdy and boring as it looked.
Yeah, I remember Mark Knight was the one that was convincing me. He was like, "Yeah, you've got to go to CDs. You've got to go to CDs." And do you remember they used to have these awful Pioneer CD players that used to sit straight up in the club with the, and then I was like, "No, no, no."
Wrong.
And then I ended up going to it. And I remember you used to have 20 tracks on a CD, write it, and you'd never know what they were. Especially my handwriting is so terrible.
But I remember, it's funny now getting vinyl back out, because vinyl brings memories flooding back. So I'm pulling records out, literally, that makes me think of that pub I talked about, the Nelson, in Gravesend. That became a McDonald's years later. But
is it the one next to Blue Water? That one?
No. It's right in the middle of Gravesend High Street, and it's like concrete jungle there now. It's sad. Obviously, it was one of those regional high streets that just died when all those malls opened up, like Blue Water and Lakeside.
Yeah. So, question I kind of always ask everyone that comes on is picking. I know it's going to be hard for you because the list goes on, but it's like, if you could think of 3 moments in your career that you can say, yeah, I'm proud of. That's, that defined me to where I am now. I can read. Well, I can pick mine for you if you want.
Well, I'll go. I think being around for the millennium obviously was incredible, because I'll never live through that again.
Yeah.
Well, probably won't. So and then, if you think it was the end of the 90s, so it was the end of that incredible era, and going up to Liverpool to do my radio show from the docks with all the crew from Cream.
Yeah.
We did it in a pub, and then we ended up on this monstrous stage they built on the docks. I think it was with Orbital or Underworld. Should know that. But that was an incredible night. And I don't know, the other one that jumps into my head, funnily enough, was was Roundhay Park in Leeds, when we did the Love Parade in the UK.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Which was like 250,000 people, and being on the stage at the end. I think it was me, Sasha, and Darren Emerson. 250,000 people in a park in the UK was pretty special then. I always think of any time I played Space Terrace,
yeah,
especially Radio 1's 10th anniversary, and then obviously those nights at Pasha, when my first residency there, was super special. So I mean, there's been a load.
Yeah.
What about you?
I was about to say, it's quite funny actually thinking about it. For 20 years you've interviewed me, and now I get to interview you.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the moments, and it was actually me and you together, it was when you let us do the Essential Mix live from Clubcast of the Loft.
All right, yeah.
And I remember I was so nervous, and I stopped the wrong CD player, but you saw it, but you got on the mic, and it was dripping with water, like it was sweat coming off the ceiling, and you got on the mic and just went, "Oh, it's so hot in here, the CD players are shutting down." And I was like, "Oh God, he said that," because I've just pressed the wrong CD player.
Yeah.
It was
that was pretty chaotic. I always wondered back in the day, like, someone pulling the power out or something.
It was just insane, that space where we had 1,000 people in a space that probably held about 100 people.
I mean, they were that was, sometimes when we were doing the archive on the Essential Mix, like 25th anniversary or something, it came up at the beginning, like when you think of people that have done the most Essential Mixes, you instantly think it must have been Carl Cox, and it is. But my name comes right up there, because I did so many, but I don't remember doing the amount of studio Essential Mixes I've done. I could probably count on less than 2 fingers. But I had a huge amount of Essential Mixes, because back in the day, the original model of the Essential Mix was we were meant to go out to clubs. Yeah. So obviously there was the studio, based ones, but initially it was all about sneaking into clubs, just plugging in to clubs and taking what was going on and spreading it around the country and around the world. So I was the host of that, obviously, and hence doing an awful lot of Essential Mixes. But
I know it was like a big deal if you got to Pound Live Essential Mix. It was a big deal, because it was you
Yeah,
know.
that's still pretty nerve-wracking to people on the odd occasion we do it. So
Yeah. One of the things I want to bring up, which is unbelievable, is obviously you getting an MBE for your services to broadcasting, which that must be up there with something special for you. That must to actually have something like that to so that, and you deserve it, rightfully so, because the amount of time and effort you put into this industry is kind of like, oh, thank you to you, going, you know, thanks for this. That must
yeah,
be.
I mean, it was a great day. I got to take my mum, you know, to Buckingham Palace and my wife and daughters. So it, you know, they'll just the fact that they'll remember it for the rest of their life. And when I go around my mum's for Sunday lunch, which I can't do right now, but
Yeah.
hello, mum. She stay inside. She just texted me before the start of this. She's in Kent still, in Gravesend. She's like, I'm getting fed up with this now. I'm thinking of going out. And she's like 88. She's like, you're not going anywhere. So but the fact that I got to take her there, and I can see the picture on the wall around her house when I go there, that's
Yeah, no, I've seen the pictures. It must be like amazing, you know, just to.
it's a very surreal day. I mean, we stayed at a hotel because I'd already moved here. It was a year after I'd moved here that we went back and got it. And so we were staying in a hotel close to Buckingham Palace, and we walked through Green Park, and then yeah, you go through the front gates, past the beefeaters and the soldiers, you know, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. The boy from Kent did good.
I'm going to sound boastful here, but I'd actually been there before.
Oh,
So
okay.
I got invited to a media day, and I went with Andy Parfitt, the old boss of Radio 1, and the Queen wanted to meet people from the music industry.
Right.
So there was about 500 people invited, but as I went in, I got separated off, and I ended up in a room with you go to all these different rooms, and they didn't tell us what was going to happen, but I ended up in a room of about 20 people, and then you're told, oh, the Queen's going to come and meet you. So I was in the inner circle, and she came round and spoke to everybody. Jamie Cullum was in the lineup that day as well, and Steve Wright, funny enough, and Brian May. So and she came round and asked me about the radio, and she said about her mum, you know, the Queen mum who adored radio and how much it meant to her, and how she was quite lonely in the war, and radio kept her sane. So it was a great conversation. So then I got back there a few years later, and they was like, "Not you again." So
Good memory then.
yeah.
For me, like when I got into music, I had a mentor who was Rob Cockerton, who was the one that kind of showed me, you know, I have like heroes, obviously yourself included, Cole Cox, people like that, but I had a mentor that I kind of looked at to kind of steer me in the right direction. Did you have one of them when you were younger? Did you have someone?
Yeah, without question, 3 or 4 actually. I mean, I would say, you know, at the beginning, Chris Hill really reached out to me and kind of befriended me, and like just gave me loads of advice. So he was a massive inspiration, not only because he was like the king of the kind of soul scene in terms of performance DJs, and his taste in music was second to none. He never really liked radio. He was purely a club guy. So he was resident at Lacey and famously the Goldmine.
Yeah.
And then he was also in the record business. So he was a partner at Ensign Records that signed the Boomtown Rats and Sinead O'Connor. And so he had a massive influence on me on getting a day job as well. And then I would say Robbie Vincent for sure with radio, who's still around to this day. I just used to listen to him religiously. And I think the whole institution of a weekly radio show, I got from Robbie, to a certain extent Greg Edwards as well, but mainly from Robbie. And then I would say Froggy, funny enough, rest in peace, on the equipments. Because back in the day, we had to run around with equipment. So you had my way into the scene was really, I had a great sound system, and that was largely because I got advice from Froggy and bought some of Froggy's equipment when he was finished with it. And I used to fill in for some of the gigs that he did. And Froggy inadvertently was the one that introduced me to Radio 1 as well. So, because he used to do the sound system for the Radio 1 Roadshow. And then I'd say back in the day, in radio terms, my old boss at Capital Radio was a great friend of mine, but a complete terrorist, but taught me so much. And his name's Richard Park. He was like the Alex Ferguson of of radio bosses in terms of his passion and his the way he got in your face as a presenter. I mean, by the time I got to Radio 1, it was like it was completely different. I was expecting that at Radio 1, but and they kind of just let you get on with it, and like they were the Arsene Wenger style. And just like you're great anyway, just go out and play. Whereas Richard Park was like, do this game. A lot of pizza throwing in the studio.
I remember when I joined Radio 1, I think you got me the job, and I joined the young guns coming through, and I remember it was the start of my Ibiza experience with Matt Priest and everyone, and Jason Carter, and that was a wild time. That was like coming to Ibiza with Radio 1 was like a traveling circus.
Yeah, I mean they really embraced it, and they we got so many memories, great memories of that time. And again, it was the imagination of the station. And I get a lot of credit for a lot of that stuff, but it was the whole team that enabled that to happen. I mean, particularly when you think back, like when I first joined Radio 1, they did the Radio 1 road shows, which went around the country with a can, hand out T-shirts and play records. And I said I wasn't going to be part of that. We needed to be in Ibiza, and it was people like Matt and Reese and Jason Carter that enabled that to happen and get us over there for that first Cafe Del Mar live broadcast in 1995. So yeah.
Have you still let's talk about Ibiza actually for a bit. Like your night at Pasha was just unbelievable when you started. There was you used to book me every season. It was one of the highlights of the season for me. And you used to live there. You had a house there, and now have you still got that time is obviously special, but have you still got that sort of relationship with Ibiza like you used to? Do you still
I mean, I don't think it's as all-encompassing in my life as it was. I think partly because I've done it, and partly because I don't think it is anymore. I mean, I think Ibiza is amazing still, and there's so many positives come out of it. But back then in the early 2000s, it was kind of the center of the universe. And it's still an amazing place to break records and make careers and DJs to find their feet and establish themselves. So I'm still fully supportive of it, and I would be there. Sadly, we would be opening Blue Marlin this Sunday, and I was going to be there 8 or 10 times this year. So now it's not there. I'm certainly missing it, but I think to a certain extent, a little bit like Radio 1, it was a great time. It was being the right place at the right time, and obviously with Danny Whittle and Mark Netto running it at that time, and bringing us in the way we did. I mean, again, me stumbling into Pasha was a bit of an accident, because I ended up I was being booked regularly by Paul Oakenfold for his night, and then he turned to me in the booth one night and said, "I'm off to America, so you're going to take over." It started with me doing half a season of Tuesdays, and then Danny was like so supportive of what we were doing, the way it ended up, that he moved me to Fridays the next year, which was 2003. So, and then we did like 5 years straight, and it was just that time when the kind of it got a bit sexy, and like the dance floor was amazing, full of amazing people, and then the VIP started to get a little bit more glamorous, and with Puff Daddy coming over and people like that, and people started flying in from London every week, and all over Europe. So yeah, it was right place, right time.
It was for me. It was such a family-based sort of thing. You had Danny, you had Mark, you had Simon,
and Skylark was one of our biggest records.
Well, that's
SOS.
But the pre-parties, I think I was exhausted before I even got to the club, because you had Rob Simeon, you had Javier, you had Danny. It was just insane, wasn't it? It was just it was like as good. It was nuts, absolutely.
Yeah, it was definitely a gang, and we were a community moving together, and we did everything together, didn't we? It was Jason By as well, and Alan and Christian as youngsters, and I mean, I know you know this, but they remain like family to me, and especially to Carolina as well. She always remembers those times, and my wife. So. Yeah,
they especially Javi and the boys, and
I mean that's the main reason. I mean, I love playing Blue Marlin. I love being outside. I love playing, you know, still with you occasionally,
Yeah.
High or Ushuaia or, you know, Pasha.
Yeah.
But really, the fun of going back now, especially living in America at the moment, is going back to see your friends and people like Javier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You know, the obviously you chose to go to America. Is it because you found that you wanted a different challenge? You wanted something, you know, because it's I used to tour a lot in the States in the early 2000s because of like Ali and Sharam made me tour there. But I tried to live there, but I just found that touring was too difficult. Was there a main reason why you decided to go to the States and leave the UK?
there was a number of reasons. One is I've traveled the world, but I never lived there anywhere else. Even in Ibiza, I never lived in Ibiza. Not for any. It was always going backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
So that was an itch to scratch there. My Carolina used to live here, and then, you know, when we met, we always, you know, she always had a, you know, the desire to come back here and spend some time here. And then really, it was my daytime job stuff that drew me, you know, made it simple, which was working with the WME agency. So
Yeah.
that got me my visa, and like it made it easy to transition over here. And I had a base over here, and I had an office, I had an assistant. So we did it. We initially did it for a year, and obviously then you're kind of the fresh face in town. So I think after knocking around up and down the M1 and the M6 for so many years, me removing myself from the UK for a while,
Yeah.
and Europe, and being more available in America to play. So I've got to play America over the last 5 years in a much kind of deeper way. And yeah, I mean, funny enough, now we are talking about coming back. So there's a world exclusive for you that we think maybe what with Corona and everything like that. Our journey might be coming to the end, and we're looking around Sevenoaks to be your neighbour.
I think I convinced you when we went out for dinner in Notting Hill when I was living there, and I convinced
Exactly.
you, Carolina. I was like, you've got to come back.
Yeah. No, we were always going to come back at some point, but now I think it feels like a really good time to transition back. So was trying to work it out.
Nice.
Never easy to move.
No, yeah. One thing I want to talk about, which I just think is genius, at the timing that you did it, was the orchestral show. You know, I think it was just, I don't know, it was something for you, especially with your career, that kind of just took you to another level, I think, in terms of your audience, because it just, I don't know, it resonated with everyone again. You know, it resonated with the old ravers, it resonated with the young generation, it resonated with people that aren't really even into dance music, you know, that don't go to clubs. Was it a process that you had in your mind for a while? Was it just something that came quite quickly?
No, it was it started off. It was like a challenge. So the proms called up the BBC and asked if they'd come up with ideas for something younger, something fresher. So the head of music at the time was George Ergotudis at Radio 1, and he called me and said, you know, what do you think about this idea? Do you think you could get your head around it? And I said, yeah, I mean, I love the idea instantly. I love the Albert Hall. He introduced me to Jules Buckley in terms of getting to understand how we would do it. And then I had this kind of blind date phone call with Jules Buckley in January of 2015. And we started working on the idea of we were given a time slot. You know, it was going to be, I think it was like 9 to 11. It was the late shift on the proms, and we had 70 minutes to fill. And I kind of started by doing a mix. I had too many tunes in it. Jules started to notate, you know, for the 65 musicians in the orchestra, because he'd by that point introduced me to the Heritage Orchestra as well. And we went about it, and it was a challenge. It was a commission. It was a job, and that's all we thought it was going to be. And it was really the reaction on the night, halfway through Fatboy Slim's Right Here, Right Now, when the whole Albert Hall just got up to its feet and started clapping and never sat down again, that we kind of looked at each other, and we could talk to each other on these mics on stage, like, oh, that was a bit special. And then, like, literally the first thing we said to each other as we came off stage at the end was, we got to do it again. And it took a while to get back out there because it's a complicated thing to do. But obviously the following year we end up doing Manchester, Birmingham, and the O2 all sold out. And it was really then it's about the crowd. The audience for this show has been so unbelievable, because that's, I mean, I'm proud of the show, and I think the show's amazing, and we do a good job, and the orchestra is incredible, and Jules is incredible. But the X factor is really the audience participation and their love for it, and that idea of being in a room of 10,000 or 18,000 people reliving these songs and these memories. That's what makes it, and that's then in a. That's also made it go beyond the kind of relapse raver. So you get all generations now coming on board.
I'd never seen it, and then obviously I played for you this year, last year, sorry, and I just remember obviously I was playing before you, and I was like, they're not here for me, so I was just trying to like tone it down and stuff. And then the minute you came on with the whole orchestra, and I just looked around, and it was like O2, I think there was about 17 or 18,000 people, and they're just. You know, they're actually going crazier there than they would do in Ibiza at a nightclub with me DJing or something like you DJing. It's like they've one big night of the year that they've geared up for. Yeah, no, it's definitely one of the best things I've ever been involved in, and something now it's turned into like an annual event pilgrimage. We're just fingers crossed at the moment. You know, I was on a phone call with my manager this morning and the promoter, and we're just obviously waiting for as long as we can. But weirdly, we're still selling tickets. You know, people are still buying tickets for the shows in end of November, December. And we're going to wait till the last possible moment. But and we'll see what's possible. But I mean, it would be a dream for me if we could do them, because I think it would be the best way of having a coming out party after all of this mess. That's what people want. That's what I feel that. Yeah. When we come back out again, and people they want to listen to music that's going to make them feel good and happy and smile. Yeah. And it's how have you dealt with the isolation stuff? You know, I had to deal with my own thing. You know, my own kind of way. I find it hard being productive, making music at the moment, and doing stuff like that. But how have you kind of dealt with it? In some ways, I mean, I have to say pretty good. LA is not a bad place to be stuck. I mean, I find it scary that I can't travel to the UK. Yeah. And I've got, you know, my 3 older kids are there, and my mum's there, and my brother's there. Yeah. So that causes some anxiety, but thank God for FaceTime and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, in a weird way, because, you know, I have these other jobs, I've kind of been busier than ever. Yeah. And what with the streaming, you're right on the and I literally get up. I'm up at like 6 in the morning, and I fall into bed at like, you know, the 11 o'clock or whatever. Yeah. And I'm exhausted because it's been flat out, and I'm getting to ride my bike a lot, which is good. But you're right on the creative front. I mean, I'm enjoying listening to music, finding music, and building radio shows and live sets. But I would have thought that I would have made more music during this time, and that has been the slow bit. Yeah. So I don't know, but I talked to Black Madonna yesterday. I talk to people every week on my Instagram thing, and then I mean, everyone's different. Some people like daily have been like writing double albums. So I know you know what's going to happen as soon as they start letting us out. We're going to miss this, and we're going to like, oh my God, we should have done more. But yeah, like you kind of like say, right, I want 2 weekends off a month now. Yeah. All right, crazy. Well, that was amazing. It was just nice to sort of dig in and catch up with you and hear. No, thanks for having us. How's the have you been spending most time in London, or are you been in Kent? We moved out. We moved out of London, and we moved back to Westmoreland. So that's amazing. Well, that's a good place to be stuck. And the weather's and you've had LA weather in the UK. It's been great. You know, it's been good. It's been because we just moved house. That, you know, there's that excitement of doing stuff to do, you know, the house and getting everything ready, getting the studio ready and stuff like that. But I really, and I genuinely mean this, I call it a job, we call it work, but I've missed going on the road and playing music. It's one of the things that you can't, like I said, I was talking to Coxie about it, and it's a big reset. It's it'll be a good thing when we come back and I mean, I'm definitely worried about even if we want to, how easy it's going to be to fly about around like you and I did. I mean, we might have to restart like back in, like, it'll be club class residency again. Well, me and Milo were talking about going, you know, with Eats and doing a road show, just going up and down the country. Well, that's what we used to do. Yeah. I mean, or
Yeah, you definitely got to do another one of those raves in the park, which I love.
Yeah, yeah,
Up the road from your house. But
we literally, that's the street we moved on to around the corner from that. So.
okay. When I'm back, I'm coming round. It might be
Yeah,
your neighbour.
that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, mate. Well,
All right.
send my love to Carolina and the
Okay.
family, and it was
I
great.
like the Junior Sanchez record, by the way. That's
Oh,
wicked.
thank you.
It's in
He's
the
on
show
fire
on.
now.
It's in the show and Hot Since '82 on Friday. So.
Oh, brilliant.
All right.
All right. You take care, Pete. See
Cheers,
you.
mate.
Thanks, mate.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Pete's Stories. That was another edition, as I was saying. Next week's guest, good friend of mine, plays for Chelsea, and we're going to talk to Marcus Alonso, see how he's been coping with a bit of time off. Thanks for watching, and I hope you're all safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye.